Scientists and health officials are on high alert. Concerns are growing following an avian flu outbreak that's spreading in livestock across the country. The virus has now spread among cattle in 9 different states, with 2 human cases reported since this outbreak began. The CDC now plans to share wastewater data with the public as it tries to track and contain the virus. But there's no denying there are worries mounting that another widespread epidemic is on the horizon. Alex Schlosser, investigative journalist, best-selling author of Fast Food Nation and producer of the documentaries Food Inc. 1 and 2, spoke on Bill Maher's show on Friday about these recent developments and offered a harrowing prediction. Take a look.
Okay, so what's the future here? Because I worry that the next one is coming or it's worse. I mean,
the next one may be right now percolating in Texas. Factory farms are a crime against nature. And I'm not a vegan, I'm not a vegetarian. These are sentient creatures that we're treating like industrial commodities. And Mother Nature is going to get back at us for us.
Alex Schlosser here with me now to talk more about this. It's scary stuff that you said, Eric. This particular strain of bird flu, we've heard about it for a long time. It's been around for 30 years, this strain. Why is there concern now?
Well, the concern is that this is extremely deadly for birds. It can kill 50 to 90% of a flock, but now we're seeing it in mammals. And we had no idea until a few months ago that this virus could infect cows. And it's mainly found in their udders, which means it goes into the milk. Now, I don't think people should be panicking. There's no evidence yet that it will harm human beings, but it's really concerning. And my opposition to factory farms is that they're the perfect vector for spreading not only this disease, but other diseases. And we have to be very humble about how we treat livestock and not transform how we raise them in a very brief period of time, as we have.
How is it going from birds to cattle, dairy cattle at this point, right? And then humans. How is it making that leap?
Well, they're not entirely sure how it's gone from birds to cattle, but they think that cattle feed got infected with bird poop from wild birds. And the cows ate the feed, became infected. One of the workers at a dairy who was infected, they think it got into his eyes, that raw milk splashed into the worker's eyes, and that's how he got infected. And again, right now, it doesn't seem to pose a huge danger to human beings. But what's so concerning about influenza is how quickly it mutates. That's why you need a new flu shot every year, because of how the flu can mutate. And we don't want this mutating so that it's very bad for people. And, you know, there's been concern about milk. It really looks like if milk is pasteurized, that it's not dangerous at all. But I would strongly advise people not to be eating raw milk. And in a very strange twist, don't feed raw milk to cats, because it's pretty clear now that this avian influenza is extremely dangerous to cats. And at one dairy in Texas, there were 24 cats. Half of them drank raw milk and died from it, and died a pretty terrible death. It's almost like out of a science fiction movie where suddenly cats would be dying from drinking raw milk. Again, I'm not trying to create panic among people, but we need to be able to get federal investigators into these dairies to test the cattle, to test the workers, and there's been huge resistance from industry to doing this.
So why is there such resistance to testing the cattle? We know the agriculture trade associations, they've been discouraging the CDC from testing. Why are they doing that?
Well, I've been looking at food safety issues for almost 30 years, and the meat industry was very against testing ground beef when we were having E. coli outbreaks. The reason they don't want testing is if you find it, you may have to deal with it. So it's an economic thing. The dairy industry is a $60 billion industry, at least. And right now, we don't know how widely dairy herds have been infected. And there hasn't really been widespread testing of dairy workers because so many of them are undocumented and fearful of coming in contact with the federal government. So, right now, among poultry, if a poultry herd is found to be contaminated, the federal government reimburses poultry farmers for the birds that have to be slaughtered. And we're going to have to come up with some economic program so that dairy farmers aren't concerned about testing and finding bird flu in their herds.
Infectious Disease Authority Michael Osterholm, he spoke with Scripps News America's Tonight last night about the unknown that still remains with this virus. We want to play some of that. Take a listen.
We're learning things in the last 2 to 3 weeks about cows getting infected in their udders with flu viruses. We don't quite yet understand what the potential risk is of this emerging virus in cattle. And what does that pose in terms of a risk for a virus that might transmit to humans and then ultimately by humans to other humans?
So, hearing that, what should the average viewer, what should the average person take away from his comments?
And by the way, Michael Osterholm is one of the greatest epidemiologists in this country. And when I met him 20 years ago, he predicted exactly these sorts of outbreaks. If you're a family and you drink milk and you're drinking pasteurized milk, the risk is probably non-existent. If you eat eggs, you should cook your eggs. And I strongly discourage anyone from drinking raw milk, and you should never give raw milk to a cat if you're a cat lover. Other than that, we need to empower the federal government to protect the public health, even if it might harm some private interests.
I'm going to ask you how we can do that when we come back, but I want you to stay right there because we're going to continue our conversation and talk about your new film, Food Inc. 2, right after this short break.
I still can't believe she's gone. These past few days has been a whirlwind.
There's so much to arrange. I just wasn't prepared.
No, but your mother was.
Yeah, good thing you and Mom got those policies. I had no idea how expensive all this would be.
I know. I didn't want to talk about it, but I'm glad she made us do it.
And the payment is on the way already. It really was as fast as they said.
Your mother always made sure we were prepared.
I can't believe you both were able to qualify with your health issues.
That's why we chose United of Omaha Life Insurance Company. There were no health questions, there were no medical exams, and our acceptance was guaranteed.
A funeral could cost more than $9,000, and prices rise each year. Have you helped prepare your family to pay for these expenses when you're gone? If you are between 45 and 85, you automatically qualify for up to $25,000 in life insurance coverage with United of Omaha. Policies start at just $6.38 a month, and your acceptance is guaranteed. You cannot be turned down for any health reason.
I didn't think you would be able to get a life insurance policy on your fixed income.
With United of Omaha, policies start at just $6.38 a month. And with the rate lock guarantee, my rate is locked in for life.
With one call and as little as 5 minutes, you can qualify for up to $25,000 in life insurance coverage. Call the number on your screen right now to lock in your rate today. There are no medical exams and no health questions. Plus, benefits can be paid within 24 hours, and unlike some policies, are payable from day one. It's never been easier. Policies offer a 30-day free look guarantee or your money back. And with our rate lock guarantee, your rates will never increase and your coverage will never decrease.
Just like Mom, always looking out for us.
And because our policy is through United of Omaha, you can use the money wherever you need it the most. Medical bills, funeral expenses, credit card debt, there are no restrictions. That's why I got my policy. I want to make sure you're taken care of when it's my time.
Oh, Dad, that's not going to be anytime soon.
Help take care of your loved ones after you're gone with a guaranteed acceptance life insurance policy from United of Omaha today. Benefits can be paid within 24 hours and can be used to pay funeral costs, outstanding medical bills, credit card debt, or more. Policies start at just $6.38 a month. If you are between 45 to 85, call United of Omaha right now. With one call and as little as 5 minutes, you could qualify for up to $25,000 in life insurance coverage. Acceptance is guaranteed. Call the number on your screen right now to lock in your rate today.
Call 800-867-4150. That's 800-867-4150. 800-867-4150. Call today.
When you walk into a supermarket, there's a whole arsenal of additives designed to mislead the brain.
Just imagine if the government decided to step in on the side of the consumer and the citizen.
We not only can do it, we have to.
That was a clip from Food Inc. 2, the sequel to the 2008 Oscar-nominated and Emmy Award-winning documentary, which presented a less than flattering look inside America's food industry. I got to say, I watched it. It changed me. We're continuing our conversation with the producer of the film, Eric Schlosser. 12 years since that first documentary, and yes, I said it, it changed me. I watched it, and my jaw was dropped basically the entire film. Food Inc. was powerful. Yep. What didn't you tell in that original that prompted this sequel, Food Inc. 2?
Well, the sequel was prompted by the fact that in many ways things had gotten worse, and we felt like it was important to return to the subject. When the pandemic happened, suddenly there were food shortages, there were images on TV of hundreds of thousands of hogs being slaughtered and just dumped because of the breakdown in production, and meatpacking workers were at the front lines of this pandemic and were being sickened, and meatpacking plants became an entry point into rural America for COVID. So we felt it was really important to revisit what's going on with our food system. And sadly, this avian influenza outbreak at dairy farms is just one more reminder of how we have changed this food system in a very brief period of time without our realizing it. And I'll just give you one example. I'm not that old, but when I was a kid, the typical hog farmer had about 85 to 90 hogs on his or her farm. And the typical dairy farm was about 200, 300 cows. Today, you have hog farms with 1,000 hogs in one building, and you have dairy farms with 10 to 20,000 cows. And these are run by big companies. Those conditions are perfect conditions for spreading all kinds of diseases. So when you go to the market, you don't see the changes that have happened, but behind the scenes, there's been massive changes in our food system.
The film touches on all kinds of issues about the food system, and something that's gotten attention lately, you see it on TV, you see it all over social media, is the difference between ultra-processed foods, these ultra-processed versus regular processed.
Yeah.
What makes a food ultra-processed?
Well, let's say you had a can of beans, and that's a processed food. It would be beans that have been cooked, and maybe there's some water and maybe some salt, and processed foods are perfectly fine for the most part. When you get an ultra-processed food, you look at the list of ingredients, and it's got flavor additives, it's got emulsifiers, it's got all kinds of chemical additives that we've really never eaten before. And you showed that picture of the Wendy's Baconator flavored Pringles. Now, that's an ultra-processed food, and I guarantee you, 50 years ago, you never could have found bacon hamburger flavored potato chips that are reconstituted. And I'm not saying that Baconator Pringles are dangerous. I'm saying that we're finding all kinds of health impacts from eating too much ultra-processed foods. The typical adult right now in the United States is getting 60% of his or her or their calories from ultra-processed foods, and children and teenagers are getting 60 to 70% of their calories. And all kinds of health problems have been linked to these ultra-processed foods.
Earlier you talked about all of us, the need for us to be informed and to be engaged and to essentially push the federal government. How can we do that?
Right. As citizens, as voters, I mean, one of the real terrible things that's happened is the amount of corporate money that's gone into politics. So again and again, if you were to take an opinion poll, do we want the federal government to be able to test and remove from the market contaminated food, I'm sure 90% of Americans don't want dangerous pathogens in their food. But because the FDA and the USDA, these agencies that are supposed to be protecting us, have been so hampered by these big companies, we have real lapses in food safety. So these changes can't come overnight, but we need first to be informed, and then we need to take action. So, food is never going to be perfectly safe, but it can be a lot safer in this country than it is right now.
Eric Schlosser, thanks so much for your time, your insight. You gave us a lot to think about. And the
Thanks
new film.
for having me.
Yeah, the new film you need to watch, Food Inc. 2. It is now available to watch streaming and on demand. Coming up, meteorologist Scott Withers will join us.
Another severe weather day today, Carolyn. Millions of Americans under severe weather threat right now as we're talking, as storms are rolling across the Sunshine State for a second day in a row. You're watching Morning Rush. Don't go anywhere. You will miss out.
Sponsored by Oak Street Health, health care for older adults. Book your visit today.
I used to think all doctors were the same. Then I switched to Oak Street Health. You see, this isn't your typical doctor's office. Instead of waiting around for me to get sick, they focus on keeping me healthy and feeling good. Hey, still got it.
Zion. No sugar, right?
And the best part, everyone at Oak Street Health is experienced with people my age.
At Oak Street Health, we specialize in caring for older adults like you with a focus on keeping you healthy. So don't wait. Call today.
Zion, we're ready for you.
Here people get to know me the old-fashioned way.
By listening.
This guy takes all the notes, so my doctor is all eyes on me, and I'm never rushed out.
Ready to go?
We get to know you better with longer appointment times, including same-day and next-day appointments.
Everyone gets their own personal care team. Hey, whether it's doctors, nurses, social workers, mental health support, even someone to help me understand my Medicare benefits. They all work together for me, myself, and I. Not to mention a 24/7 patient support line.
We customized a plan for him, and we can do the same for you.
Getting the care you need has never been easier because our team members work together to handle all your healthcare needs.
And you get all this with no extra cost. They even gather all your medical records and health history. So switching to their doctors is easy. And you can keep living your life your way.
At Oak Street Health, we specialize in caring for older adults like you. Call 800-967-2157 to schedule a visit and see why we are the only primary care provider to carry the AARP name. Oak Street Health.
I have, over my 30 years, seen many patients who have excessive sweating. It is very much a confidence killer. Excessive sweating is not something you have to live with. I recommend Carpe for my patients.
Carpe is by far the most effective antiperspirant I've ever used.
I love Carpe. Now I don't sweat.
Effective and affordable. It's a game changer.
Avoid expensive treatments, injections, and prescriptions. Your total body sweat solution is available at mycarpe.com. Visit today and get free shipping.
What would increase safety around firearms?
The Second Amendment will always be safe.
I'm demanding a ban.